Good afternoon. On behalf of the Board of Education, I call to order our work session for March. Today is Tuesday, March 11th. Special welcome to those joining us here in the auditorium, as well as those watching live stream. Special welcome to ABSS staff, to Commissioner Thompson, and I see Commissioner Priola as well, and our friends from the media. Dr. Parker is unable to join us this afternoon. And with that, board members, you've had an opportunity to review the agenda. Is there a motion to approve at this time?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you both. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. One thing that you'll notice as we move forward, with the exception of obviously the agenda approval and personnel report, the majority of our voting items will be moved to our evening meetings. They'll be introduced here at the work session, and then we'll vote on those in the evening meeting. And that is a special thank you to Dr. Fleming in moving us back to that model. We will move into Board of Education business, and before us today is conversation regarding our vacant board seat. And I'll open it up to the board for conversation. And this is to determine how we want to, what our next steps may look like in filling our vacancy. Anybody wants to jump in and kind of start off that conversation?
Well, I started off. So I do think it is important to fill the seat, especially given how long of a term is still left with that seat until the next election, because the next election is not till November of 2026, and we haven't even got till August of this year. So I think it is important to go through a process of filling that seat, and being a person who got appointed to my seat before the election and then, winning from the election. I think the process that was previously done with the board, since it's already been done prior to, I think we should stick to that similar process where you took in the letters of interest from people who was interested in the seat, where they could send in their letter of interest, any other information they wanted to send in along with that. They could do that, letter, email, either way. And then came to an evening meeting and spoke, gave them time to speak in that meeting on why they would want to be appointed to that seat. I feel like that was a process that was already done, so I think we should be sticking to that similar process this time around also.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Any other comments or questions from the board? Ms. Harvey?
I just agree that with what Seneca said, we should go about the same process, having to whether it be email us or whatever to show their interest in the board seat. And then, we go about figuring out who's best for the board seat. But I just think it should be the same actual thing that Seneca had to go through in his appointing to the seat.
Mr. Engel, Mr. Wagner, not to put you on the spot.
I just was going to say I'm in concurrence with both of my partners here in crime on this board, and 20 days? 20 days applications. What do you think?
I would think that's plenty. I think those in the community who are wanting to be part of the board already have that inkling. So I think the sooner we can get through this process, the better off we're going to be, for sure.
Yeah, I agree with all of you guys and ladies. Would it be? And I've talked to Dr. Parker this morning. Or actually last night, and he would be in agreement with that, with what we've talked about as well here today, in doing it kind of in the same process. Do you think that, kind of following Mr. Wagner, that it would be acceptable to maybe go ahead and get it posted and maybe have the deadline prior to our evening meeting this month, if that's not too soon? That gives us about 2 weeks prior to the evening meeting for applications to come in, and it gives the public an opportunity to speak at our evening meeting as well, and then potentially make a decision at that meeting. Thoughts on that, Mr. Mitchell? Is that?
Yeah, that's fine. We talked about this a bunch the last go around. The statute doesn't really say much of anything about the process other than that it shall be filled, and I think the process worked last time, and so I could certainly understand wanting to use a similar process. So I imagine we have all the materials. And so, yeah, I think that, I don't think it's a vote, but the board could decide right now to set a certain deadline, to post the vacancy, have a deadline for submissions, and make it known to the folks who are interested that they'll have the opportunity to speak at whatever meeting you all decide. And just as a reminder, and I know you all know this, whatever conversation, debate, deliberation, and voting would all be done in open session.
Yes, sir. So is it agreeable with the board to perhaps set the deadline for the Friday prior to the March 24th evening meeting? Do you feel like that's adequate time?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that. Similar to what Mr. Wagner said, I think because of the time frame of when Chuck gave the resignation from our last meeting, I think from that point, people who have the interest or are thinking about it, I think giving them from now until that time frame is plenty of time for them to decide if they want to put their name in there or not.
Yes, Dr. Fleming.
Just for, I guess, record-keeping purposes, would the board like this just added to the homepage of the board website, district website, or the collection of either letters, whatever it may be? Do you want that emailed to Karen or to Adam? How would you guys like that?
I think if we followed the same procedure that we did before, and I know you weren't with us, I think we posted it and letters of interest were directed to Ms. Chandler. And then she shared them with the board collectively upon receipt, and then they were made available publicly, of course. Does that work we can get it posted maybe as quick as tomorrow?
Sounds good.
And then, obviously, if we can advertise something, to make the public aware on our website with a link to the information would be great. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Sounds like we have agreement on next steps for the vacant board seat. And so we'll look forward to more discussion and hopefully a list of names and interested community members. So we do encourage you that if you want to come up and join us at least twice a month, and make some really important decisions on the important work in education. To watch for that information that'll be coming out and send us a letter. So thank you all for that conversation. We will move into our Superintendent Finance Human Resources, and I'll turn the floor over to Dr. Fleming and Mr. Messer for budget updates.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Mr. Messer will cover our final draft of the current expense budget, followed by Mr. Hook on the capital outlay request. Both are requests. A few things I want to clarify before we move forward. Since my time in ABSS, I've had conversations with all of you, with members of the public, certainly county commissioners, county manager, and others on a lot of the needs within the school district. Most of those conversations have been around capital, obviously, but certainly to an extent current expense as well, where we cut positions, where we need operational funding, as we've added square footage, as we have needed additional custodial support, supplies, utilities, whatever it may be, which is included in the request. And as I've had those conversations, I haven't had anyone yet say you don't need those or those aren't important. Certainly when we go back to the facility side, everyone, I can safely say everyone has agreed that many of our school facilities are 20 plus years behind, 30 years behind, as far as maintenance, not just preventive maintenance, but major renovations. And I think a lot about our high schools, first of all, just because they're larger in footprint and all. And you have Williams High School, historic school. I compare that to the Myers Parks of Mecklenburg County or the Broughtons of Wake County, and it really disheartens me a bit that some of the, when you compare that to many of the historic schools around the state, it's certainly probably in worse shape than any of them. It hasn't had the total renovation. It hasn't had shoring up structurally, but not just there, but go to Cummings or any of our other high schools where you just see where things have kind of been left behind. And I have to give a little bit of the benefit, I won't say benefit of the doubt, but a little benefit to our county leaders, our commissioners, county manager, county administration and all, because as I've looked back, ABSS really has not asked for a lot of renovation dollars. They've asked for capital money to maybe fix things here and there, but when you talk about outside of the bond, when you talk about true renovating, gutting out, new windows, roofs, flooring, electrical, plumbing, all the trades, we really have not done that. And one of the things I wanted to make sure we did when we got here, and I know it was mentioned before I arrived in talking to Mr. Hook, that county commissioners have said ABSS needs to have a capital improvement plan. It appears to me, and I didn't live through all the history, but it appears to me that over the years, the school district would go to the commissioners, ask for a handful of items. They might get it, they might not, but there never was a plan for renovations. There was never a plan for capital needs. And I hope that starts now, and it does. The issue with doing that is when you add up the 5+ years of capital needs, you get into several millions of dollars, which has been reported by local media. One, you have to remember that's not an annual request. That's this year request. That's over 5 years, 5 annual budgets. Also keep in mind when you look at our current expense request, which is around $5 million, I believe, a significant portion of that are items that were needed prior to this year. For a good example would be operational expenses. We opened Southeast Alamance High School, but there was no additional funding provided to operate the school. The money was provided to build the school, but there was no operations included in that. As other renovations have taken place in schools or we've added square footage, again, no operational dollars were added there. So that's where a lot of this current expense request comes from. There's some in there with the cut. There's obviously some in there with classified or certified supplement, and now a classified supplement, which I think our folks definitely need. And you can see that in our vacancies. So I wanted to make sure we started this conversation out with, this is a large amount of money. Had we looked back probably and gave estimates of how much things would be, people probably would not be as shell-shocked. But I did say this, I don't know if I was going to say this necessarily publicly, but as I've had conversations with folks and they've agreed in all of these needs, but then I gave the amount and they do get sticker shock. But everyone agreed that the needs are there. Unfortunately, those needs aren't free. And so as we move forward, I want us to keep that in mind, that everything we're asking for is a need. There's no want. There's no, cute fuzzy animal in there that we really want. These are needs. And so as we move forward, I ask that everyone keeps that in mind. And I do want to say I'm very appreciative of our county commissioners that have funded us up to this point. But we really, and it comes down to bold leadership and being able to get the school district caught up to where it needs to be, not just on the operations side, but also the facility side as well. And so with that said, pending any questions, I will hand it over to Mr. Messer for a look at our current expense needs.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, Superintendent. Before you this afternoon is a proposed budget of just a little over $59 million. That's an increase ask of $5.7 million. Our budget priorities evolve around sustaining a local salary supplement model to ensure continued competitiveness. Everyone in here knows that the salary supplement for certified staff was frozen this year without an increase, dealing with the current budget situation that we're in. In this budget proposal is truing that up, the additional increase that would have happened this year and the anticipated increase for next year. fund current and anticipated state-driven compensation and benefit increases. We've talked about those several times. I'll get in more detail of those. Operational needs and requirements as costs continue to escalate. Dr. Fleming just talked a few minutes about that. And provide additional certified staff to assist with the schools and serving students. Next page, next slide, Dennis. You've seen a couple of these slides before, just putting in front of you. As we stand now, ABSS is currently funded. 60% of our budget is state money, 26% of our budget is local, and 14% is federal. I will say this for next year, the federal amount will go down because all of the ESSER funding has been exhausted. So that will not be a part of the federal budget for next year. So I would anticipate that to go down to 8 to 9% of our total budget probably, which means that the state and local will have to, that will just increase. Next slide. I presented this slide at the joint meeting back in January. And this is just a point in time. And it does say 624, but I will tell you this, it is still preliminary because believe it or not, some school districts still have not completed their year-end audit. But with that being said, if there is a movement, you won't move but 1 or 2 spots based off of that. So currently, ABSS is the 90th ranked school district in funding per pupil from the state. Local 89th, federal is 47th, and total we're the 92nd out of 116 funded school district at $11,875 per pupil. Now I will say this is on the operational side, this local current expense funding. Now I anticipate the state ranking and the local ranking to go up next year with the additional funding that was received this year and the additional low wealth money that was received this year, but it won't move the needle that much. But I anticipate a better ranking as far as per pupil budgeting. And again, it's still preliminary. Next slide, Dennis. All right, some of the budgeting factors. I will say this, one of the most challenging budgets to put together is for a public school district because we really have no idea as to what our revenue sources are going to be. We have a benchmark of the prior year, but we do not have any state allotments yet. We definitely do not have any federal allotments. Who knows how that's going to come down because of all the stuff that you're seeing in the news and dealing with the Department of Education. And of course, we're charged with putting numbers together without a lot of information and trying to come up with a request to our county commissioners. So really, there's really a lot of unknowns in trying to put this budget together. Staffing shortages, every industry is facing staffing shortages, but I will sit here and say that in areas such as EC and in classified staff, we're really seeing a hit on that. Just the competitive wage to bring qualified candidates to public schools has really been a challenge. The certified and classified employee salary supplement. Currently, ABSS does not have a classified salary supplement, but many school districts around us do have that, and we will be presenting that a little later in this presentation. And then the certified. Currently, as of June, ABSS's certified staff is 20th in the state, but 8th in the region. As far as the region goes, that is your surrounding school districts. The organization I'm a part of is the North Carolina Association of School Business Officials, and we have regional meetings, and included in those regional meetings are CFOs from Orange County, Durham County, Guilford County, Castle County, Moore, Lee, Chatham, Wake, Harnett. I mean, there's quite a few in our region. And within that region, 8th is just kind of middle of the pack, but 20th overall in the state. So you can see that the majority of your really competitive certified salary supplements are in this region where we're currently at. So there is definitely some competition in recruiting qualified teachers to be in our schools. Department of Public Instruction, it seems like they're getting reduced every year, and whenever they're reduced, it really pushes a lot more down to the districts as far as reporting and requirements to meet federal and state regulations, the compliance. The regulatory piece of it is really tremendous, and in the past, DPI has assisted in that, but now it's really almost nothing. It really falls down to the districts. Increase in employee benefits and operational expenses. We've talked about that in the past, and I'll show you another slide as to what we're anticipating, what those will be this year. Then, of course, the negative fund balance that was presented at the end of our audit a couple of months ago. Next slide, Dennis. So, some other unknown factors, actual average daily membership, which is our ADM. We really don't know what that number is going to be yet until students show up in the fall. You know, there's community growth, but to what extent? I know that we're doing an ORED analysis of our schools and ADM. And then again, I just spoke about, we have no idea what our federal allotments are. We got somewhat of an idea of our state allotments, but it will not be all of our state allotments. Hopefully we will receive those in the next 30 days. All right, so let's get to the detail of the request. Anticipated wage and benefit increases. I'm sitting here 4.5 months in the job, and we have been able to identify many areas in which we could be a lot more efficient in staffing as far as the funding side of staffing. So if you remember at the last meeting, I knew that the $1 million that was presented was going to change. I just didn't know how much. But we've reduced that amount from $1 million to $250,000 to meet the need for our anticipated locally paid employees. That is anticipating a 4% wage increase for classified and an average increase for teachers, which, you know, teacher salaries impact how we pay out our supplements. An increase in retirement benefit, an anticipated 2%, and then health insurance. All the districts around are budgeting $8,400 per employee. We don't really know the exact amount, but we feel really comfortable that it's going to be somewhere around that space. And currently, we have just a little over 75 locally paid employees. That's it. The state is covering everything else. We've been
Did you
able
say 75? I'm sorry, Mr. Messer.
75, that is correct.
Locally paid.
Okay. Certified employee supplement, I spoke about that, you know, ABSS was 8th in the region and 20th in the state. We've been able to trim that dollar amount down as well to $1.75 million to true up the supplement based off of freezing it at the same level this year as it was last year. And giving the anticipated increase for next year. As we know that the certified employee supplement is a huge recruiting tool for teachers. Next slide. Now this is something that is new. ABS does not have a classified employee supplement. At the last meeting, you asked me to go back and put together a flat rate supplement model, and that's what I'm going to be presenting as part of the budget request. The total price tag for that is $1.1 million, and that includes the retirement and Social Security and the benefits that go along with it. Next slide. And here's the breakdown of that classified employee supplement. It's broken into tiers. This is district experience. It starts out at 0 to 5 years for $1,000, and then 26 plus years, $1,500. And if passed and funded by the commissioners, I recommend that we pay half of it in November and half of it in June. I think that makes more of an impact than increasing someone's pay $100 a month. They really don't feel the impact of that. I'll stop there just for a second and maybe answer any questions around that.
Questions from the board on the presentation to this point? Mr. Rogers?
Mr. Messner, can you just state that again on the classified employee supplement? You said half will be paid when and when?
In November, so employees will feel the impact right at the holidays and have extra money for the holiday season. And then in June, to bridge the gap for those employees that don't have summer employment, it will help bridge the gap to whenever they come back to school in the fall. 10-month employees receive a paycheck in May, but they don't receive one until they return in the fall, and this would bridge the gap for that. That's just what I recommend. I mean,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I get your logic in that because, like you said, the holiday period and then the end of the school year going over into the summertime and everything too. So that makes sense. The other thing was back to the employee anticipated wage and benefit increases. I know you had told us at the previous meeting that at that time it was the estimate of the $1 million, and now it's down to 250,000. Yeah, 250,000. And so, getting from that possible estimate of the 1 million down to the 250,000, what I guess what was the process and everything of going through that? Just because looking at it, it says the 4% average wage increase anticipated. 4% for the classified retirement. So, you know, some of the stuff is saying increases on there, but we've seen that the cost came down.
yeah, we were able to move a large number of employees that were on the schedule, on our pay schedule, to be paid with local dollars, but there was room on the state side to be able to move those employees to be paid with state funding, which freed up local dollars, or which reduced the requests that would be needed for next year. Just looking at structures and areas in which I guess previously hadn't been looked at, we were able to take advantage of using state dollars a little more than it had been done in the past.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for explaining that out. Because, like I said, I was trying to understand how I was saying increases on here, but then the dollar amount was down. So I was just trying to make sure I was getting that all correct.
Mm-hmm.
Any other
I
questions?
just want to make a comment.
Yes, sir.
I just want to reiterate the reason for this local certified employee supplement is because of the competition around us. You know, Alamance County is a growing county. We're very fortunate because of that, and our county commissioners have done a great job about bringing businesses into the county. But we're recruiting for that same labor each and every day, and so I'm supportive of this. I think it's a great idea, and hopefully it's going to keep down our cost of hiring people as well, because once you lose an employee, that's not a free cost. It costs us to hire others, so I'm excited about this, and thank you for your work on this.
Two quick questions. What happens on our anticipated, and I know it's our best guess at this point until the budgets are finalized at the state level, but what happens if those anticipated numbers are too low, perhaps?
So that would be a great thing, meaning that employees will be getting more than a 4% raise, in my opinion. But we would just have to find efficiencies in other areas where we're going to be under budget to cover those.
Okay.
And with the small number of employees that we have locally paid at the moment, any difference would definitely be manageable,
Okay.
in my opinion.
And then how many classified employees do we have that will be impacted with our classified supplement that will be able to see that boost in pay?
Hold on a second. I want to double check this, but I think it's around 900 classified employees.
Thank you.
But I'll double check and make sure that that's an accurate number for you.
Thank you. Did you have another question, Mr. Rogers? Okay. Oh, maybe great minds think alike. Any other questions up to this point? Thank you, Mr. Messer.
All right, I will continue on. Next slide, operating increases. I know that Dr. Fleming spoke about this. Part of the $850,000 increase is a 5% in utility costs, which is a normal 3% from year to year. But looking at the numbers, it appears that we're going to be about 2% over this year, and we'll continue to monitor that. So we're asking for a 5% increase for next year. Property insurance increase, we had to up our our property values on our insurance, as far as, requesting that. We do currently have our insurance out for bid. It's posted on the website, and I think it's supposed to come out in the paper this coming Thursday, or it might have been last Thursday. But hopefully we'll get more concrete numbers as we get closer to that bid opening. Workers' compensation increase, 300,000. I tell you, that was one of the things that popped off. Popped on my radar when it first came, is that we've had significant losses as far as employee injuries, and this definitely has caused our workers' compensation insurance costs to skyrocket. And those that might know a little bit about it, you pay for that over a 3-year period until those come off the ledger. We currently have a safety committee in place. It's just starting to ramp back up to try to mitigate some of these issues that we're having, but again, it's in the infancy stages. Our risk manager is currently organizing that, and we're reviewing every insurance policy that we have. Contracted services, just replacing legacy employees and not finding qualified replacements is just going to cause our cost to increase on contracted services. And then whether we want to or not, we're going to eventually have to change our financial software, and we're just going to be in the beginning phases of that, planning and reviewing different vendors.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
on the maintenance and custodial services, I do want to share this with the board. I know we got a couple county commissioners in here too, so this is not an issue we need to face this year, but in the next year or two, our custodial service contract will be up, and we're going to have to make some, well, I don't know that any of them are easy decisions, but some difficult decisions of either moving along with a significant increase in custodial service contract pricing, or moving that back in-house. If we move it back in-house where they're ABSS employees, we'll have to buy all new equipment in the schools, all the way from scrubbers, buffers, what am I missing? Supplies, mop buckets. And so you're talking hundreds with an S, thousands of dollars. But also, I do believe in talking to some custodial service companies out there, I think we're looking at with an S again, hundreds of thousands of dollars in new contract, because the labor costs have gone up, just the general inflation in general. So either way, that's going to be a tough decision, whichever route we go. And so I just want to put that on your radar. Again, not something we have to worry about today or this year, but in the next year or two, we will, probably more within the next year, we will have to face this issue of increased costs for custodial services, in-house or external, either way.
Just to piggyback on that a little bit, just the employee cost as far as the retirement piece, if we go up 2%, which we're anticipating, that'll be over 26% of an employee's salary that we're going to have to match to the retirement system, plus any kind of Social Security. So it's almost, the cost benefit is almost, I don't want to say equal without doing a little bit more analysis, but on, even though the custodial contract is maybe a little more expensive, you got to count into the overhead piece of it, and it's almost a wash. I would pretty much, it would be close. Yep.
The current one was written when they did the first 1 year, they could do up to 4 additional 1 years. So I think we can renew 2 more times. But I can check it.
Next slide, Dennis. Just some additional items to note. Just a follow-up on the fiscal year-end audit. All corrective actions have been put in place with no exceptions. So we anticipate better results with this coming year's audit. And actually, the auditors will be in-house this coming Monday to start that process. And there will be money added back to fund balance, and we will be in a positive fund balance as of June 30, 25, as I see here today. How much, I'm not sure, but we will be positive. And there is definitely a potential need for a salary study to remain competitive in the workforce in the surrounding area. And charter schools, I always want to keep this on your radar because it is a big deal as it relates to our budget. As of last month, you can see the numbers. It's around 10.7% of Alamance County students attend charter schools. Now that has come down a little bit since I started. It was like 11.1, and we're continuing to see that trend come down, which is really unexpected, come down a little bit. So whenever you see my proposed budget, it's going to be a little bit under 10%. You know, I may be a little aggressive on that, but I think that the way things are trending, it'll kind of somewhat get there by the end of 26. Next slide. Total revenue received subject to charter schools so far through February, 31,489,000. Total paid out is around 10.9%.
I have a quick question. When will we have a better idea of the impact of opportunity scholarships?
That I am unsure of. I know that they're
Okay.
still in Raleigh.
The early,
trying to
yeah.
decide the budget. So once Dr. Fleming may have a better answer.
Well, I don't necessarily have a better answer, but I do. If you'll go back to your charter numbers there on the slide before, so where Mr. Messer mentioned that the trend is going down, there is a belief. Again, how will opportunity scholarships affect us? I don't know the answer dollar amount wise. Certainly, that will take some students away from us, but I think one of the reasons, and there's this belief that the reason why some of the charter school numbers are going down is because opportunity scholarships apply to both traditional public school, charters, and everybody, homeschools if they choose. And so so I say this because it's kind of depending on how you look at it. Yes, we're losing less students to charters. The question is, and eventually we'll know this as the reports come out, are we losing students to opportunity scholarships? Potentially, yes, there too. But if you look at opportunity scholarships, if you're pro school choice or not, it doesn't matter necessarily, but regardless how you look at it, it is going to pull students from both the traditional publics and the charters. And so, I guess for once, traditional public schools and charter schools have a similar fear, which that has not happened probably before, because a lot of folks that choose charters, they want kind of that private school experience with no cost. Well, now they really can get the private school experience with no cost with an opportunity scholarship. And so I do believe it will hurt traditional public schools, but it's also really going to, percentage-wise, it's really going to hurt charter schools as well, I believe. So the current belief is that type of trend where the number is going down is probably through opportunity scholarships. Again, it may be a while before we get reports on exactly dollar amounts that impacts us, but I thought that was kind of interesting that you asked that question.
One other caveat that you can add in that, and I experienced this in my previous district, is that Alamance County is growing, and it all depends on the percentage of students coming into the area. So if more of those students are attending our schools compared to charter schools, then of course the percentage will go down. The math just works that way.
And those impacts on our ADM, that average daily membership, that number drives so much.
It does.
When we're looking at calculations.
The 10-day ADM, the 10th day of school, really solidifies all of our state allotments. So we really, truly don't get our full state allotment numbers until after the 10th day of school.
Thank you.
And that was delayed this year because of Helene. They couldn't put out our 10-day numbers because they couldn't get them for all of the school districts. And Dr. Fleming may be able to add a little bit more to this, but I really think that Helene and the relief funding is really going to impact our budgets across the state, all school districts.
Thank you so much. Any other questions up to this point? Yes, sir, Mr. Rogers.
Going back to that 10-day ADM, because like Chair Sandy said, it drives so much as far as our allotment dollars and everything and what we get from state funding. And so they do that at the 10-day. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's not another point during the school year where they really come back and reevaluate that. And I asked that because what was it? It was one of the schools I visited where they was telling me at another one of our elementary schools or something, and maybe at one of the middle schools, they've then seen like a little bit of a influx of students right after Christmas break and stuff. And so then with that influx of them students, it's not like then they come back and count our number to reevaluate what our allotment should look like, correct?
That's correct. We float the expense for those students to the next fiscal year.
Mr. Messer, could you make that comment for those who are viewing here today, how it affects ABSS funding, I guess on the elementary level, when we lose a child or student in charter schools?
Yeah, so as far as money that's allocated from our county commissioners, I use this term loosely, the money follows the child. So if we have an Alamance student that attends a charter school, whether it's an in-county charter or an out-of-county charter, that per pupil amount follows that student. So we have to pay that amount to the charter schools. We recalculate that every 30 days based off of our previous month's ADM, and then we get an ADM roster from all of the charter schools, and that's how it's calculated.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Messer.
Next slide. So this is just a synopsis of our budget line items where I'm going to go over in a few minutes, but the certified employee supplement is roughly 25% of the local current expense fund, all the way down to central service administration of $2 million, which is 3.4%. I am going to bring up that the central service or central office allotment on the state side has not changed since 2002. It's the same allotment formula that public schools are funded 22 or 23 years later, has not changed. So meaning that I say that just that the formula has only it's changed, but it's decreased over the years as far as how it's calculated. When the calculations change, it's always a reduction of central office. But the actual formula itself is still in place from 2002. Next slide. And locally funded employees, we are constantly moving employees to the state or from the state to local. So these are the combination of locally funded employees, maintenance employees, custodians, district administrators, down to substitutes, just to give you an idea as to the types of employees that we use local funding for.
And you said it at present there's 75.
75.
Okay.
Next slide. This is just a summary of the expansion request that's being proposed to you this afternoon. Employee benefit cost increases of $250,000. The certified employee correction or made whole for 2 years, $1.75 million. Operating expenses of $850,000. Certified staff additions of APs and instructional support. Classified employee supplement of $1.1 million, and charter schools $520,000. Total expansion request $5,720,000.
Thank you so much. Any other questions in regards to Mr. Messer's portion?
I got one more piece.
Yeah, but this portion, any other questions thus far? Okay, the floor is still yours.
Okay, the Excel spreadsheet, Dennis, if you can pull up the budget worksheet. Yeah. So full transparency, as always, I'm trying to get you to see the different structure that I have here. You can see where the $1.75 million is budgeted in the certified supplement /01 classroom teachers. The $1.1 million of the classified supplement is in non-instructional support. School building admin, $525,000, that's for additional APs. Instructional support for social workers, guidance counselors, 725. You see the 250,000, I put it in non-contributory employee benefits because I'm not sure exactly at this point which locally funded employees and which area they will go in. Once we get a better picture for next year, that 250,000 will be broken out between different categories whenever I bring the budget resolution to the board in the fall. You see the charter schools of 520,000. Utility cost increase of 293,000. I want to stop and talk about operations and maintenance. That's 98,751, but at the request of operations and maintenance, we're moving $80,000 out of that to co-curricular to pay for the maintenance of athletic fields and put that under co-curricular. Right now, currently, it's under maintenance, but we're moving the 80,000 out to the co-curricular piece. And then the financial services of 389, that's just the insurance cost increases and the financial software upgrade. I do want to speak a second about this negative fund balance here. Historically, in the past, ABSS has budgeted $1 million for fines and forfeitures. Well, we've never received $1 million of fines and forfeitures from the county, so I'm not sure where that came from. So I'm anticipating around 700,000, but to make this chart here work, since really what's being presented to you is the expansion request, I took the $1 million off the negative fund balance, but when the budget is presented to you in the fall, the negative fund balance is not going to be there. We will have fund balance at June 30th. So that's just to make the numbers to flow to the actual budget for next year, $59,047,000.
Questions for
More
Ms.
of an accounting thing than.
Thank you. I appreciate the transparency. Mr. Rogers.
So mine is not more of a question. It might be a question in there, but it's more of a statement. So I know last year sitting up here on the board and we was going through the budget season. I'll call it a season because it was a long period of going through numbers, going through this thing, cutting this, possibly not cutting that. And I think when we got down to the end piece, our request then was for about 10.3 million that we requested at that time. We ended up getting around about 4.8 million, I want to say. Am I correct with that, Mr. Messner? Somewhere around that amount is what we received.
Somewhere around 4.5.
Yeah, 4.5. Okay. And so looking at this year's request, this is, like I said, it's just a statement to show from a difference of a year ago. This year's request is basically from what we initially requested. This is 4.6 million in a decrease of a request from what we did the previous year. And I mean, just being honest with you, I feel like we are hitting a lot of the main priorities with this, especially like the certified supplement, getting that back whole to where we can get that to. The request around the classified employees, giving them an increase to make sure that we're continuing to be competitive and also, I guess you can say, jump in that fight to try to recruit people in that piece too. And then like what Dr. Fleming had said earlier, a lot of the operational stuff, which was interesting on the fact that we had a whole school that was not accounted for in that operational cost. But now knowing that we are running our heating and air through the whole year, so that was going to increase things in utilities because of the situation that we had dealt with before around the mold, and also doing things around trying to upgrade technologies, and also with the maintenance pieces of things. Like Dr. Fleming said, costs continue to just go up in those things. If you're at your home, just speaking of myself, we're talking about trying to get gravel for our driveway right now, and the cost of that and getting that loaded and delivered out to your home, that cost from what it was probably a couple of years ago is not the same thing. So some of those operational costs and things are going to be increases. It's no way really around that, and trying to get a plan in place off of what Mr. Hook has done worked with capital improvement does at least put us in the play of we're looking towards what our future can be on what we need to be doing with our school, because there is a lot of schools that needs things, and also community growth tells us that Mr. Engel, me and you talk about all the time, but I think other board members talk about it too, is that at some point we're possibly going to have to talk about a new school down the road, or new schools with an S, because I think I did see where Mebane might have approved like 400 homes down in Mebane, which I don't know where y'all slamming people down in Mebane, but hey, y'all are figuring it out. But I know also right down here on Beaumont, if anybody knows about Gantown, they're clearing out space out there and about to build houses out there. So Alamance County continues to grow. Like Mr. Avery said, our commissioners continue to bring in businesses, but also if you look right across our county line, right down there near Liberty, because I was at Sylvan this past week, the Toyota plant is going up out there. So it's going to be people that going to be possibly living in Alamance County that is working at that plant. So we continue to grow. So these things, and looking ahead of what our infrastructure needs to look like, what our school system needs to look like, all of those things are going to continue to be costs if we really be in a future forward county and school system. So like I said, it was just more of a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Engel?
Yes, just briefly, when you look at these classified employees, think of one word, Buc-ee's, and what's coming to Alamance County or this area. And there's going to be a lot of competition coming up for the school system just to keep classified employees, particularly, if you think about cafeteria workers, bus drivers, and many of the classified employees. It's going to be tough.
Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Engel.
Just one quick comment.
Yes, sir.
I want to make sure everyone knows this is not just across ABSS. This is across all parts of our country. Everybody's having to pay more and provide more opportunities for current staff, specifically those who you want to keep. And we want to keep our qualified teachers and staff here, so I'm supportive of the budget. Again, I'm very thankful our county commissioners continue to drive quality businesses to this community, but those are businesses we have to compete with. We have to understand one of the priorities of this community is to make sure the next leaders in our community stay here.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Any other comments? Thank you so much, Mr. Messer.
Thank you. I'll turn the floor over to my colleague, Mr. Hook.
Thank you.
Dennis, we're still back on the prior presentation. Could you open the operations budget proposals? Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Fleming, I want to walk back through a presentation that I showed about a month back that illustrates our capital outlay needs and our capital improvement plan proposal. The only change here is in the capital outlay 27-28 year. I went back and added a dollar figure to facilities to add addition of lights at the baseball and softball field at Cummings High School. I put that in the third year of this plan, 27-28. So like I had mentioned a month back, the county requests that we make our requests for capital outlay and capital improvement plan align with these categories. So I have spreadsheets. I'll show you individual things that we need to be working on, and where the numbers come from. But when you consolidate them here into these three categories, equipment, facilities, and vehicles, That's where those categories come from. It's statutory requirement that we request in this format to the county. So we have these numbers here. I've tried my best to level across the years the request to the county. This is, we call it capital outlay, but sometimes we call it PAYGO, but these are the funds that we would use for more what you'd call small projects, things that that we can get done relatively quickly. Let's scroll down, Dennis, to the capital improvement plan. And similar words to what Dr. Fleming had said earlier, we don't think that that the school system ever presented what we would call a formal capital improvement plan to the county. And if you were to go back and watch just in the past 2 years, how many times I went to the commissioners asking for funds in a more or less haphazard way, that's because there was an absence of a capital improvement plan. If you went back further than that, they were working more aligned with what they were calling a top 10 list. But even the top 10 list requests were not made all at one time. 4 of the larger roofing requests in the top 10 list came about from the joint meeting in January of 2022 when the county told the school system to make some requests for roofing repairs. And so that's what got Graham Middle, Graham High, Southern, and Hall River roof projects going. That was kind of the infancy in January of 2022. But the county needs to be able to budget with information from us relative to the large projects, which is what the capital improvement plan really is. So when we make our request in this format, which is the way that the majority of the counties in the state, the school systems in the state, this is the way they request to their county. They say this is what we want to do this year, next year, and so on. So we've got it painted as a 5-year plan. The roof replacements and HVAC replacements come directly from, I think it was February 5th of 2024 when the commissioners had a presentation from their roof study engineer and their HVAC study engineer that illustrated the top 20 or 21 roofs and HVAC projects that need to be taken on. So these numbers that I have in the roof row and the HVAC row across these years come directly from the county-funded study, which puts us in alignment with what they wanted to do. The technology request, last year we had that pushed in as a separate PAYGO item, but the county management has asked that we push the technology stream of spending across these years into the capital improvement plan, so we've done that. And then we've gone back and we've put in the next 3 years funding for school safety, which is cameras and keyless door access. Those dollars there, the 1.7 in the next 2 years and the 250 in the third year, that would get us complete across the district with schools that do not have camera systems or keyless door access. And then I went back in year 3 and put in a budget figure to represent the schools that are missing security vestibules. There was no way for the district to continue putting in cameras and vestibules simultaneously. There weren't enough funds for that. So in the past 2 years, we've gone towards camera systems and door systems only, but we do need to go back and correct that situation where we have schools without security vestibules. So then across the bottom, I've done the same thing. I tried to level the CIP request to the county in each of those years. And like Dr. Fleming said, this is not a one-year ask. This just lists the things that we need to do, large projects, but where the funding would come from for this would be from capital reserves or remaining bond funds and things like that, where the county would have to make budget amendments to match the individual projects that we have listed in the spreadsheets that match this data. All right, Dennis, let's go to the one that's listed CIP. That one, yes. So that's the exact same slide I just showed you, but if we scroll down and just look year by year, you can see what I've done here and where all these dollar figures come from. So
This one shows where the roof money would go in each of those years. So I've only listed the sites where there would be some activity here. Maybe have a few extra sites here, but so you can see in each year, like for 25, 26, what our desires would be. It would be to put a roof on Southern Middle and Sylvan for about $6 million total. And then if you go across, you can see the roofs in the next year and so on. So that's where the roof dollars come from. This comes directly from that roofing study by the county that was presented in February of 24 at the county commissioners meetings. I have rearranged the order somewhat in the first couple of years because we have water, not bad, but we have a lot of roof leaks reported at Southern Middle and Sylvan, and those roofs are over 30 years. So I pushed those to the first year, and then the other situations are not bad at all. And then if you scroll down to the next one, that one shows the proposed HVAC needs across each of those years. And what I've done is I've taken their study that was presented to the commissioners, and I've just pulled large, complete renovation projects, one in each year. And these are really large. In the first year at Graham High, the equipment there, the average life age of each thing there is over 30 years old. And then the next year would be Southern High, and then Western High, Eastern High, and then that last year would be Alexander Wilson. But at the same time, in addition to the complete renovation at each of those schools, we have chillers that are 26 years and older, so we need to be replacing those. Those are really the workhorse of the HVAC systems. With no chiller, you get no cooling, and with no cooling, we know what we get. And I think if you recall some of the headlines that I presented in the joint meeting that we had a couple of months back, some of the terrible situations they had in Wake County and Guilford County, and they traced them back to no preventative maintenance and no replacement of HVAC equipment. And I mentioned we don't want to be on that list or in those headlines, and this is what keeps us out of that situation. Again, trying to level the dollars spent across. So this enables the county, as they're looking at trying to fund this CIP, that it presents a logical stream of spending. If we go down to the next one, this is the technology budget across each of those years, so you can see where the money would be spent in each of those years. And for what I had mentioned last time I showed you this, that you can see increases across the years, mainly for a couple of reasons. As we continue our lease of 25%, a replacement of student devices with a lease, so we got the first 25% this year. Next year we would get 25% more, which would cause us to have the first lease going and the second lease going. And then in the third year, we would be leasing 75% of our devices, and in the fourth year, 100% of our devices would be leased for students. And then in the year 26, 27, there's a more substantial jump because that's the year that all of our staff devices will be over 5 years old, and we need to replace staff devices. So that figure is $2 million. And then, Dennis, if you go down to that last one, this represents the safety and security needs that I illustrated in the first slide that shows where we don't have cameras and door systems, and shows how we would tackle that. And then that last year where we would try to tackle vestibules. Dennis, if we could go to the one that's labeled a capital outlay plan, up one, that one. So that is the same slide that I showed you earlier that just shows year by year across those broad categories. But if we go down each of these slides, you can see that shows the 25, 26 things that have to be fixed. There's nothing on any of these lists that doesn't have to be done. In reality, it all should be done now, but that's just not achievable. So what I've tried to do is to balance the spending across the years, and this just kind of lists all the things that we need to do year by year. Will some of the things on later slides break in the first year? Yes, and that's what the contingency's for. And there are all sorts of things. That contingency number those are the dollars that we use for the things that we don't know are going to break, or that they break a year or two earlier than we think they're going to break. And that happens all the time. We spend money daily on things that break that were not on any list. So we have to have some money to do that, or we would be running schools without HVAC systems here and there all over the place. So you can look across this list and you can see the specific items. And then on the far right, I've listed that broad category that the county requests those to be given to them in. And then I have one more slide that I think is interesting, the HVAC project details. I didn't have this for you last time, but if you were to ask what's in that large dollar figure at Graham High School, all these things are over 30 years old, or they're just absent. So the DOAS, that's the direct outside air system, there's no fresh air system at Graham High School, which is what we've been putting in at schools to introduce fresh air into the schools. There's no AC in the main gym. So you got really big ticket items there, but then all the other things listed here, they're all over 30 years old. So they have to be replaced. So when you look at what's a complete renovation at Graham or Southern or Eastern, they're the same footprint more or less. So that's what's, they have very similar things on the list. So Eastern's a little different. The chiller and boilers were replaced in the bond in '23. So the cost is a little bit less for Eastern. And then if you go up to Southern, Southern was built without any chillers at all. So that the dollar figure there is different, but Southern's larger than any of the others, so it has more individual pieces of equipment. So that represents all the things there. And if you go to the very bottom, Dennis, that's across the years. I made this little section here, chiller and boiler replacements across each of those years. This is all directly from one of those slides that I have in there and from that study that the county conducted around HVAC. But the Hall River and Sylvan chillers are over 30 years old. The Sylvan chiller, one of the two compressors is down right now, and we're going to look at having to replace that out of contingency funds. So the lead time on chillers is still about 30 weeks. And when you look across these, all of these chillers are 26 years and older, with the Hallfields and Garrett and Woodlawn chillers being the ones that are 26 years old. Hallfields, Garrett's, there are 3 chillers there. One of them is already gone and had to be replaced. So you have 2 of the 3 remaining original chillers there. And then Hillcrest is the only one that's a boiler situation. So that just kind of gives you more detail about what all that stuff really is.
A quick question for you, sir. If we're doing preventive maintenance throughout the life cycle of HVAC system, what's the typical lifespan of one today?
Well, I'm preclude my answer with, we are now in a service contract for chiller preventative maintenance. I mean, you know the situation that we have with a dwindling maintenance staff. So, we do all that we can, but we're in repair mode. And like Mr. Messer said, we're having to supplement our maintenance staff with professional service contracts to be able to keep things in good repair. But we did, for the first time ever, enter into a service contract for chiller preventative maintenance, and that started last week. And it started right here at this building and at East Lawn. So before, we did what we could. So if you have a good preventative maintenance, when a chiller gets to be 20 years old, or any other piece of equipment, HVAC, you need to be making a plan to replace it. So that's at 20, and so we're pushing 30, or like the one at Graham Middle School, that chiller is 33 years old.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Any other questions from the board? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hook.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
So my understanding is there is a desire for the county to comply with their deadline for our draft budget by the 31st. So we will kind of process, and if you have any questions, please let us know. Obviously, public feedback. We look to make a decision are looking for approval at our evening meeting so that we can make sure that we can get it to our commissioner partners to comply with their deadline for a draft budget. Dr. Fleming, did you want to add anything to that, or?
No, and at the 24th meeting, that will start at 6 p.m. with a public hearing. The board meeting will start at 6:30. We're going to try to make that agenda late-ish because we know so much, one, we have the public hearing, but also we know we may have significant conversation on the budget proposal, and we'll have quite a few items on the consent agenda as well that are coming from today's meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming. At this time, I welcome our Chief Academic Officer, Ms. Ravonda Johnson, to the podium.
So good evening, Chair Ellington Graves, Dr. Fleming, and school board members. I'm going to bring you the first semester of our school year. And before we get started, a lot of times you're going to see us compare data to last year. Just remember, we're not comparing apples to apples. First of all, it's different groups of students. So when you're comparing like attendance to last year's students, they are different from the grade levels, but it's still important for us to look at that, especially like with when we look at it for academic data. If we see that the same things were taking place, then, you know, do we need to revise how we're doing things? If we see that if it's the same, if standards haven't been adjusted, like this year with biology, with the sciences, the standards were rewritten. So the assessments are different, so we can't really look at that, but let's say that it's 3 years out, we would look to see if we are teaching it one way, but last year we got better results, would we go back and say the way we've organized it's better? So I just want to put that disclaimer out there when we're starting. So we're going to go through attendance, our discipline, and then we'll look at our academic data because obviously we need the kids in school. We also need them making sure that they're doing the right behavior so they can stay in class and here. So that's very important. Attendance has been something that we've been bringing to your attention for several years now because if the kids are not in school, then they're not learning. So if you look, you'll see our elementary kids have increased slightly from last year. We're still pushing kids to be in school. I'll be honest with you, this has been a tough year with sickness, with everyone, you know, getting sick. So, you know, the fact that they increased slightly with the flus and the RSV and the things that are going around, our middle schools dropped. With 89.76 first semester, and then our high schools also dropped in attendance. So overall, for first semester, ABSS dropped. So still need a lot of work to do. We want to be at that 95% or higher rate. We don't want kids to come sick because they spread germs. So we're not saying send your kid if they're sick. But we do need kids to be in school because if you're not there, you're not learning. And, you know, we're asking our teachers to teach, you know, bell to bell, because we have a lot that we need to learn. And we need to remember, if we're going to change the calendar, and this is very important, then we're trying to teach everything and get it done before Christmas for those high school students. If that's their attendance rate, they're going to miss out. And they're not going to have the material they need in order to be successful on those assessments. Even though teachers may give the work for them to make up, they've missed what's been said in class. And there's a lot to be said about what happens in the classroom, especially if you're on a block schedule. But even for the littles and even for the middles, what teachers say in class is a big thing. And if you're not hearing it, then even though you may get some instruction, it's not the same. So we need for people to be present in the classrooms in order for us to learn. So attendance is a big thing. We need to encourage kids to come. There is no free days or today I just need to stay home. You know, I think today I need the day off. We have Saturday and Sundays off. We have enough holidays. They're spread out throughout the year. We have work days. You know, those are the days off. And we're not in school like 12 hours a day. So those are the days off. But we need to really push for our kids to be in school. We try to share with the Portrait of a Graduate that we're pushing, with the state. We try to share that when you get a job, if you only come to your job 90% of the time, they're going to let you go. They are not going to let you stay, because they need somebody that's going to come to work regularly. So we need our kids in school. So we're asking families to please make sure you're coming to school. We've tried various incentives. Our principals a lot of times sit in zones. So this year, like the southeast zone, they did a big attendance push, and I think they were able to go to a southeast football game. They worked really hard together to try to be able to do that. There were some other things that other zones did, but just really trying to push the attendance in their zone and work together. So just continuing to push those efforts. Discipline. If you look at here, our littles, they're learning a lot from somebody. They actually went up in the number of OSS incidents. We actually decreased in middle and high. So we saw those going down, but our littles did have a increase in their world. We do have our principal leadership team, and Dr. Turner is looking along with the central office team. We're looking at that data to see what we can do to be able to support that number and what some of those things are doing. If you look at the top reason that most of those, it's the fifth graders who seem to have the most incidents, and it's for fighting and physical aggression. So it's our fifth graders that seem to be having the most issues. And then after them, believe it or not, it is our kindergartners seem to be acting up. We're having significant issues with those kindergartners. So we definitely want to work with our kinders because they're just coming to school and we need them to be able to do right. But I think a lot of times they learn things that they see and they think that's the right way to handle it. So we are working closely with our district improvement team as well as our principal leadership team on some things that we can put in place to work closely to show alternatives, that this is the way you handle those things. We don't put hands on each other. Then if you look at the days that we spend out of school, again, we don't want our kids out of school. We try to look for alternatives. We do have SEAL for our grades 6 through 12 kids that parents can sign for them. If it's 3 or more days of suspension, they can go to SEAL at Ray Street instead of staying at home. And there they work with a teacher on their class or the work that they would miss. And it counts then, if they go each day, it goes down to an ISS instead of an OSS, but they're also working on their work with that teacher. So that they do have that opportunity if the family signs up for that. If you look, these are the number of days that we have missed out of school this year for OSS, 7,752 days. K-12, again, we need our kids in school if we're going to do well, and that's a lot of days out of school we've already missed. Our middle schools actually have the most days missed, even though they had decreased in the amount of OSS incidents, but those incidents resulted in a lot of days out, which mainly were due to fighting and aggression. Same thing with the high school at 2,899. For our middle and high, the two biggest things are with the fighting and aggression and vaping. Those are the two things that we have the biggest issues with. These are our long-term suspensions. You can see here we have increased from last year, 30 and 44 for middle and high, and altogether we have 74. And again, when these kids are out of school, this means that they're not learning. These kids do, though, go to Ray Street, where they are learning and participating in those, in the classes. Another alternative is to go to ISS, and we try to push that because we want kids to stay in school. Teachers are able to stop by, help out with some work. Our ML teachers, our EC teachers are able to stop by to continue to help. In middle school this year and high school, we've had about 1,626 kids go to ISS this year. So we're encouraging our principals, when it is an offense that can be, ISS can be used, we do encourage them to use that as opposed to OSS. But again, a lot of our issues have been this year around the vaping and the fighting. So those things we send home. And there is the days, the number of days. Decreased from last year. Now we're going to move into the elementary data points. And this is our reading check-in data. Remember, we discussed earlier in the year, we take check-ins. These are state check-ins. The state administers them. There's a window that we do it. And check-in data is not used for us for grades. They're not used at all for grades. They allow us to test over a certain data set or standards for us to see what the kids know for that. And those help us see what we need to remediate, kids that are doing really well, how can we move forward and accelerate those, what we need to do in small groups, how can we drive instruction, maybe we need to reteach the whole class because we see that not many got it at all. So we use those just to drive instruction. They are not used for grading, and they're not used to evaluate teachers. They're used for us just to improve what we're doing with kids. So if you look this year, you can see in our third grade that with the standards that were assessed, we have about 44% of our kids were able to master in third grade the standards that were tested. So we need a lot of work for those third graders to continue to move. Fourth grade, over 50% of them were able to master it, but we're still not where we need to be. We've got more work to do. And then fifth grade at the same thing. Where we need to be. We have about 50 days left in the school year. It's amazing how fast this year has gone. So this is why it is important that every kid comes to school. This is why it's important that every adult in the building is focused and that we're doing everything we can, that we're being accountable for what every kid deserves, because we still have a lot of work to do. And again, this isn't something that we use to measure people by. It's used to drive what we're doing with those kids. And how are we using it? Because what I may need may not be what Mr. Rogers needs. So how are we differentiating to make sure that we're both being served by that? If you look at our math and science, again, same thing. These numbers are not being used, again, where you don't say, well, we went down from last year, because these are different kids. They're not apples to apples if you go across. These kids here are now in fourth grade, so that would be what they are, but they're different standards. We're saying that about the kids who took this assessment in third grade, they mastered the standards that were covered. They only mastered about 39% of those standards. So we've got a lot of work to do. And we've got some good things that were being used, but are we using them with fidelity? Are we teaching our standards? As administrators, are we going in and monitoring what's being taught? Are we sure that we're doing the small groups, and are we following up with that data? Are we using the check-in data and going back and reteaching? Those are the questions we needed to be asking. When the check-ins come in, what's the next step for that? And how are we monitoring to ensure that these kids are doing that? Because again, there's a lot of work that needs to be done before EOGs to be able to move. We had such a lot of success last year. We don't want to come down off of that, so those are the questions that we ask. And then our science in 5th grade, we were over the 50% mark, and we want to keep going up from that. Middle school, with the reading check-in data there, our 6th grade, when they did their check-in, came in right under 50%. They've been focused a lot more this year. We have them, they use Achieve, and they've just been focused in on their using the check-ins and using those focus documents that they have. They've been making sure they're following those. We've seen a lot more use for them tying theirs back to their school improvement plan, so that's been refreshing to see them do that. 7th grade went right in on the mark, and then 8th grade is coming in at the 47th percentile, so but still a lot of work that they need to do with reading. And then with math, again, we've got work to do. We do have a couple different programs that we are using, and one we're piloting to see how that helps. Some excitement going on with, today we had a launch, and hopefully that's going to step up because something we could use with all of them. But if we look here, tons of work that need to be done again in math. Math is tough for us, for our kids, but we're hoping with our K-5, as you remember, you approved for us to finally get a curriculum. The district had not had a math curriculum in over 20 years, and we finally got one. And hopefully we're going to see the kids coming up, not with that foundation and knowledge, so that we see these scores improve. But again, there's a lot of things that could be said as to why these scores aren't, and they're real, but again, you can't use those as excuses. We've got to be following the standards and making sure we're doing small groups and helping our kids get the scores that are needed. The check-in data for science dropped again. Once again, what are we doing to reteach to ensure that they're getting there? And then this one with just reminding you how EOCs were given. They were given after Christmas because, again, that is when we test, because we're on the traditional calendar. If anybody earned anything below a level 3, it's just called not proficient. Anything above a level 3, remember GLP is grade level proficiency. Career and college readiness is CCR, so that's a 4 and a 5. And this was a punch in the gut, especially after how we did last year. Now remember, this is only for the kids who took Math 1 first semester. And that was a little over 500 kids took that. A lot of our kids take Math 1 in 8th grade, so they would not be included in this. We do have a significant number of kids who take year-long Math 1. They take Foundations first semester and Math 1 second semester. But these are the kids who take Math 1, just plain Math 1 first semester. And you saw this big drop here as well as this significant drop there. So that was not at all what we needed. And then here you saw a slight increase in both of the Math 3s. Biologies, again, when there's a new assessment development and administered, the Department of Instruction collects all the raw scores, and they undergo a standard setting in order to put it on a 100-point scale, so we will not get these scores back until the fall. So that's why you don't see anything in biology. And then we had a significant drop in English too. So kind of hard to take when we did so well last year. Again, there is, I could sit here and tell you what people would say, but we have to look past those. The challenges are real, but we have to figure out what are the solutions we can do, because these are kids that still need to be able to master them no matter what the challenges are. Career and technical data, they actually had some great wins this year when Ms. Drummond and I had a talk. She said, I'm going to focus on those credentials because these kids need to walk out of ABSS with credentials. That's going to open doors for them. And first semester, she did what she said she was going to do. First semester, our kids earned 5,729 credentials. So she met that mark in first semester. I can't wait to see what she does second semester. Her overall proficiency for first semester state assessments was 70.04. Her state assessments and PBMs were 70.04 with that, and then the credentials as proof of learning. Remember, there are some assessments that the credentials would count as that. She was at 52.17. Questions?
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Questions for Ms. Johnson? Mr. Rogers?
So, Ms. Johnson, I know you were saying that with them check-ins, we look at, from that check-in, what do we need to go back to as far as instruction-wise? And I know our schools have the school improvement plan. So from a district level down to our actual school level, what are we going to do, or what can we do to help in those school improvement plans and to recheck through them school improvement plans and meeting with the principals and everything and checking on that status of how those things have been going? And then also, not to make an excuse around this, but through some of this, what is possibly maybe the impacts of, especially down at our elementary school level, not having them SIS folks that was acting almost in like them interventionalists that was helping like some of our tier kids and pulling them into those space. And I talk about that because when, like I said earlier, when I visited down at Sylvan and was talking to Principal Hamilton down there, she was like, you know, with some of that loss, she herself is handling some of that herself and trying to do some of those things too. So
I'll share first some of the challenges that I know if we had the principals in here, they would share. And like I said, these are real, but you still have to move forward because our report card, doesn't matter what's real, they're going to judge us, right, by the report card. You know, we have vacancies. I mean, we have subs sitting in math classes. We have subs in grade 4. So that's real. And it doesn't, the teachers are working hard to help cover or help give the material, but it's a real thing. We did suffer cuts. You know, the CIS, assistant principals, I mean, we had principals up until Dr. Fleming allowed schools to get temporary test administrators. We had principals being the EOC test coordinator. So we've had those types of things where everybody's had to do multiple jobs this year. And so it took them away from some of the things they were doing. So those things are real. So they've had to take on, as leaders, they've had to take on a few extra hats that maybe they wouldn't have worn, which would have maybe allowed them to be doing more focused on instructional things in the building. But again, when you have people moving into the county, they don't really think about that those things could have happened. They look and say, this is a D school, so I'm not moving there. So we have to be careful that we are still working. And so I'm thankful that we have somebody that's, you know, they're working to get our budget correct so that we can go back hopefully and get the support that the schools need. So that is the answer to that. And we have to always figure out how can we move forward because we don't want to become an excuse, right? Your second question on what can we do. So tomorrow, one of the things we are going to do is we're going to spend time looking at the data and in our school improvement plans because you have to look at what did you say you were going to do this year. And one of the things that now that we have Dr. Turner, she and Dr. Haley and myself have been sitting and looking in the school improvement plans. And one of the things we're going to do tomorrow is sit with the principals and have them go back and look, because if you're not doing the things that you said you were going to do inside the school improvement plan, and you haven't had time to look at it and you're not doing them with fidelity, then maybe that's why we aren't where we need to be with these scores. If you have been doing them and they're not working, then what are you going to change? Because that's the best part about our school improvement plans. They're living documents. So if you know you're doing them and they're not getting you outcomes, you should have already changed them, because that's how you get them. And with 50 days left, we need to do that. And how are you monitoring it? Because if you're not monitoring it, what we say is, if you don't inspect what you expect, it won't happen. And just one person not doing that can bring everything down. So we have a leadership meeting tomorrow, and that's one of the activities that we're going to do, is making sure that we are doing that and give them time to do that and collaborate with their peers, because maybe this person here is a little stronger in something they say would allow them to be able to do that. I think we need time to be able to do that, because they don't get a lot of time just to be away and talk with that piece of it. And I know for a fact they don't have time to always sit and go back and review, because that's at the bottom of their thought process, because for them right now, they're just going day by day. And we need them to look at that, and we need them to say, here are the things I'm going to do to monitor, and these are the strategies that I'm going to make sure I'm using to get through these 50 days, because if they don't, they're going to, and some of them know this, some just came off the list, but if you're not careful, you're going to go right back on it. So you've got to stay strong in order to be there.
Well, thank you for that, and good to hear about the meeting that's about to happen and everything. I guess another piece, which I don't know if y'all going to do that in the meeting or if the principals get that from the school level piece, is possibly finding out from the classroom teachers and educators and the things of what they're seeing, and trying to understand what can happen in the classroom to help out those students get to the level of where we're hoping for them to be and trying to get them to. Because like you said, the third grader from last year is now the fourth grader this year. So of course it is not that same student. So it would be good to have some of that input also from the educators in that piece on what is happening and what they would like to see in that piece too.
And that should, in the way that looks, is to bring in your leadership team and talk to them. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of times when you talk to the kids, a lot of times if you even tell a fourth grader and you challenge, how are you going to help us get there? It's powerful what a young person will say you're going to do. I was sharing with Dr. Fleming and a couple people before this. There was a young man who he is bound and determined he wants to go to high school next year because he wants to be part of a welding program. And now he's going to have access to a tutoring thing when he has a question on his homework. And he wanted to make sure he knew where to go to get it, all because he wants to be part of the welding program. So he has a goal set for himself. And when I was in his classroom today, that's what he was focused on. But sometimes we have to have that extra conversation in order to give them something to work towards. And, that's part of that whole relationship. And not that, not to add anything to that plate, but just sometimes that little bit of conversation may help some of those who aren't self-motivated. And it makes a difference.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Any other questions?
First, got a comment, then a question. For those substitute teachers in Alamance County, we want to thank you. We could not get through every school day if it wasn't for you, so we thank you for what you do. We appreciate you taking care of our kids, so thank you for doing that. And please volunteer if you have in the past. Secondly, how many substitute teachers do you think we utilize every day in specifics, just any school?
I'll have to refer to Miss Anderson.
It's ballpark. I'm just trying to get this in the back of my head.
So typically our fill rate is about 91%. But when we had our last teacher workday, the fill rate as far as when teachers were out, we were at about 67%. So I will have to get for you, Mr. Wagner, an approximate amount, but what I can tell you, without our substitutes, our schools would be in critical condition because they serve such a critical role in helping us on a daily basis. But not only our substitutes, also our teacher assistants, they also step in that capacity when we can't find a substitute teacher.
And we want to thank teachers' assistants as well. So could you let me know high school, middle school, elementary level, what that is? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Ms. Harvey?
I don't guess this is a question, but maybe it is. So when we go back to attendance, and especially in high school, and we have so many of our high school students, you know, whether they're at ACC, in the CCP program, but let's say, for instance, when school starts at the beginning of the school year, you know, kids are required to go to their homeroom. Well, some of those kids can't go to homeroom because they're at ACC, but those kids are still being counted absent. And so for me as a parent, and I know because my child went, but I get the notification from Power School that says she's being counted absent. So of course I email the teacher back to say, hey, she's at ACC, but I always go back to the parents who might not have Power School downloaded, who might not know that they need to email the teacher to say, hey, my child really isn't absent, she's at ACC. That counts against, you know, the attendance numbers. That counts against the students, you know, it's going to count as an absence. So I go back to that, and I think, you know, there's, I guess that's a small problem that we need to kind of fix, because at the end of the day, when we're looking at numbers, we want our numbers to look good. And when we think about all of our students that do take advantage of the programs that we offer, you know, who are getting counted absent, who are really not absent, they're just not in their home school at that moment. So I think, you know, if we looked into situations like that, that would help us. And then going to the ISS, the students or the schools that try to send their students to ISS versus OSS. But what happens when we don't have an ISS coordinator, we don't have an ISS teacher? Those kids are being sent home, you know? So what are we doing to make sure that in regards to teachers, but also that we have an ISS coordinator so that we don't have, or so that our OSS numbers aren't as high?
You mean when the ISS person is sick or school doesn't have one, period?
School doesn't have one.
Okay. Okay, I'll get those, and we'll work on the Power School, because I'll have to check into that about the Power School thing. I'd had to ask that division, but I'll work on it and get it to you.
And thank you for all you do, Ravonda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harvey. Any other questions? Ravonda, or Ms. Johnson, I'm sorry. We've got 50 days before the next EOCs. And I know you're having a leadership meeting tomorrow. What are things that we can do to make sure that our students and teachers have support once you kind of determine, like the school improvement plans and what we haven't accomplished? Because we did make so much progress last year on the low performing schools list. And we saw a lot of growth across the district, and now we're not seeing. It was hard to read some of this stuff. What can we do to make sure that we're better supporting our students and our staff? I know we talked about the loss of positions and the substitutes and things like that, but just making sure that we can kind of overcome these challenges so that we finish strong this year. But maybe in a way of being proactive for next year.
Well, I think I'm optimistic because I want to see things half full and not half empty. I think, number one, we're heading into the spring, and the transition, we now have a superintendent, and we have, we're not in a transition anymore. He's here, and we know. And, I think when we're in a transition phase, it's getting used to, now we have a finance person, so we know everybody's getting paid and we know the money. Everything's kind of settling down. So I think part of that helps. I do feel that there's more stability now. I think, we just, everybody was going through so much right around those times. I think now we've got what we need, and then I think tomorrow we're going to have time to focus. What is it we need to be doing in order to get that movement? And having the principals be able to sit and identify what they need. We started our second round of day-to-days already, where the schools are actually looking at the check-ins, identifying kids who may need Tier 2, Tier 3 services, whether it be academic, whether it be behavior services, what are we going to do for them? I've been reading some of the survey data that the teachers have been saying, and some of them have been thanking, some of them have been telling their principals, I feel like I need this in order for this to happen. So I think the survey data is telling the principals what they need. So I think that's a good thing that they've been doing that. I think our intervention time is becoming more intentional by using that survey data that they're doing. So I think we have to do that. I think tomorrow is going to allow us to say, for principals, put down what you're going to do now to hold yourself accountable for getting this work done. And then now that we have Dr. Turner, it's going to be better for the two of them to be able to go in, because we now have these documents to say, all right, let's pull out that document, let's hit these rooms, because we know where the kids are. We know where they're predicted to score. Let's go see how they're doing. And that allows us to also bring up and see how these kids are doing, to see if we're going to be able to hopefully make our goals, to be able to move forward and make things happen. So I'm optimistic on that, and I think when you have to believe that that's going to happen, and I think we have the people that can make that move forward in the buildings. I think even with the teachers, I think they have the tools. I think we just have to be able to believe in them and believe that they're going to make things happen, and then whatever they need, we support that. I think we have to say to the kids, we know you can do this. Settle down and show that the kids today, when I was at the school I was at today, they were hungry for what they were getting ready to do. There wasn't one kid that was disruptive. They wanted it. And then when that one little boy, when he found out he was going to be able to get tutor and help at home, he was like on cloud 9. Because he has this thing that he wants to go do next year. He has a vision for beyond where he's at right now. And I think we just have to breathe that into the kids and make that happen. And I think encouragement, I think they're encouraged when you go into buildings and you're encouraging them. I think that I've heard, that when some of you come out, that it's nice to see that you're coming out, and I think it's nice that you're encouraging them. Makes a world of difference.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. I think it's important for our message, and I think I speak on behalf of the board. If I don't, please add to this, but you see this data and it's hard, but we have really good teachers, and we have really good leadership, and we have really good students and families. And I think it's just, we've got to really rally together as a community, and make sure that we believe we can do this in 50 days, and we can make some progress, and then figure out how to do a little bit better next year and just continue to grow. So I want our message today to be very positive, that what can we do to help support our leaders in the school buildings? Utilize us, let us know, so that we can try to make a difference. Anything else from the board?
Just adding on to what you're saying, just because myself and Miss Harvey was there on Friday, and we told her that we will make sure that we shouted it out, because we really did like this. The Reading Rainbow Wall at North Graham that their principal had over there. She said she always has a hard time owning what type of good things that she had, and she was like, okay, will y'all please just let that be known, especially to Miss Anderson, that she is owning that. So, I wanted to make sure that I did talk about that from seeing that.
Thank you. Another great example of what's right in our schools. Thank you so much, Ms. Johnson. And I believe you're up next as well.
Yes, ma'am. So the next thing I have for you is the 24-25 calendar update, and this will be a voting item. And the reason we're bringing this for you today is because we are adjusting this year's calendar, and we'll need for you to vote for this. If you look at this first, again, the state requires 185 days or 1,025 hours for students in the school year, and they require 215 days for employees that are 10 months. So due to the inclement weather that we have faced this year, and hopefully we are done with it, we had to make some adjustments because of needing to for time. February 28th went from a work day to a student day. Whoops. June 6th, the last day of school, will now be a full day for students instead of a get out early day. And then for staff, June 16th and 17th, in order to meet the 215 day, would be an optional teacher work day in order for us to do this. So again, that's an optional teacher work day if they're doing that. And this is what that would look like. We did the calendar for you. And questions?
Questions from the board?
I'll put this back up just to explain that part in case you needed it.
Any questions for Ms. Johnson? Is there a motion to approve the calendar to make sure we're in compliance with?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Engel.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Harvey. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Okay, the next calendar, and this is just information to bring to you, is our survey closed, and we are going to share information for you about the proposal calendars for the 26-27 school year. Again, I'm not going to read through this because we've done it many times, but there are the state requirements there again. And of course, the draft calendars that you saw, the calendar over here again is the one that has us taking exams before the holidays. That is calendar option 1. And we would actually be getting out of school May 26th. And then calendar option 2 has us with a traditional calendar where we would take our state assessments after winter break in January, and has us getting out June 4th. So the feedback that we got, the majority voted for option 1, which was at 61.1% of those who filled out the survey and completed it were in favor of option 1, which would allow us to start early and end in May. And we had less vote for option 2, which was the traditional calendar, 38.9%. Some of the feedback that we got, I won't read all of it, I'll just kind of choose. We put a mixture of both. One said leave the calendar alone, no reason to change it, stop making things harder for parents, staff, and students, please stay within compliance to state law. And another one said, thank you for giving parents a long lead time before making a major calendar change. So you can see that there was a mixture of feedback that was in there.
Any comments from the board?
And of course, this is the last slide. The next slide is questions.
So this is presented for information today. Any comments or questions from the board at this time?
Just a comment of just thanking staff again for working on this and putting out the surveys and thanking everyone who completed the surveys and gave their feedback, because that's always needed. I feel like as a person representing your county or representing people and your constituents, you should hear feedback from them directly on what they would like and prefer. So good to see those who did respond back and to see what their feedback is on that, reading through the various comments that we did get in their feedback also.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Yes, sir.
There's a tremendous number of bills in the General Assembly, not only in the House, but also in the Senate now, to change those calendars. I talked with Representative Riddell this morning, and he really didn't have a feeling one way or the other as to whether one's going to make it through to the end. So just keep that in mind as we go forward.
Thank you for that update, Mr. Engel. All righty. We will move into field trip approvals.
Okay, I am bringing before you something two field trips for you to consider at the night meeting for consent agenda. The first one is for Southern High School to go to Chicago, Illinois in April to compete in the Life Smart National Competition. There will be 5 students who have made it to become to compete in the Life Smart State Champions at the national level. They'll be competing either in personal finance, consumer rights and responsibilities, environment, technology, workforce preparation, health and safety. And then the second field trip is for Western High School students. The AP Calculus and AP Physics classes would like to go to the Engineering Day at Carowinds on May 2nd to participate in the interactive and exclusive opportunity for students to engage in industry at the Carowinds Day. So we'd like for you to consider that until the night meeting and where you would vote at the consent agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Any questions about either of these 2 field trips? We will look forward to those on the consent agenda in March. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. This time I invite Dr. Davis to the podium, our Chief Student Services Officer. While she's making her way to the podium, I just want to say thank you to Commissioner Thompson. I know she and one of our community members has helped raise some of the money for the one of our field trips at one of our high schools for our senior class. So just want to say thank you and acknowledge the work from her and the community members for helping make that happen.
So good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members, and Dr. Fleming. So the first thing on the agenda is grants. We have 2 grants, both Siobhan Vi from E.M. Holt received both of these grants. The first one, she was a recipient of DKG's Delta Beta 2025 Novice Teacher Grant in the amount of $200. Funds will be used to create a garden for students at E.M. Holt. Specifically, she's going to purchase 2 garden beds and all the things that comes with it. Second, she received a grant from Burroughs Welcome in the amount of $3,000. This project involves integrating renewable energy and agricultural technology into a greenhouse. The greenhouse will be powered by solar panels, providing sustainable energy. Students will learn how renewable energy and agriculture work together, exploring the science and mathematics behind energy production, climate control, and efficient farming practices. By engaging in this project, students will gain hands-on experience in how technology and sustainability can enhance agricultural practices while also understanding the importance of renewable energy and modern farming. So that is a total of $3,200 for grants this month.
Any questions about those 2 grants for Dr. Davis? We will move those to the consent agenda for the March evening meeting.
Grants are only information.
Oh, grants are only information. My apologies.
So So next we move to gifts. So we have 3 gifts. The first, A-plus Schools of North Carolina is gifting $1,200 to celebrate and support North Graham Elementary's continued growth in its A-plus practices and philosophy. They will use the money to provide an arts integrated experience for students and staff that aligns with state standards and enriches the school community engagement with an exposure to the arts. The second, Phillips Chapel Church has donated $1,870 to Alexander Wilson's Elementary School. Funds will be used for lunch debt and other student expenses. The third gift, Mebane Presbyterian Church has donated $1,068.45 to South Mebane Elementary School. They will apply the funds to outstanding lunch debt. So that's a total of $4,138.45 for the month of March.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Questions or comments on these 3 gifts?
Just a quick comment. I want to personally thank those entities within our community who helps our students. I know a lot of this goes unsaid. We're very thankful for what you do as a community, so thank you for those donations.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. We will move these to our consent agenda for our 24th meeting.
Thank you.
I believe at this time I welcome Mr. Hook to the podium, our Chief Operations Officer.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Fleming, the first item I have for you is information regarding a refrigerated box truck purchase that we need to make for the school nutrition division. At this point, we do not have a refrigerated box truck, so this really goes to food safety. Currently, we use a truck that's not refrigerated, and it's a 1990 model with about 150,000 miles. We have attached some information. We're not going to open it here, but it's a bid tab. Food safety is the primary reason for purchasing this truck, and it'll be used to deliver refrigerated and frozen foods from the warehouse to the school locations. The cost of the purchase is $148,703.16. So my desire would be to put that on the consent agenda at the night meeting.
Questions or comments for Mr. Hook?
And Mr. Hook, you said that currently now, because we don't have one, we're just transferring this just in a non-refrigerated truck.
Yes.
Interesting. All right, thank you.
And you probably mentioned this, but this is child nutrition funds.
Yes, child nutrition, their fund balance.
All righty, we will see that on the consent agenda for the 24th.
The next item I have is a voting item. Our mowing contractor at South Graham retired at the end of the winter mowing season. It's time to start mowing now. So we got three bids, and we took the lowest bidder, which is one of our existing contractors who handles many other school locations. So because the amount of the total contract is pushed beyond my signing limit and beyond Dr. Fleming's signing limit, I need for you to vote for approval. The value of the amendment is $18,900. That's what it would take to mow the lawn all year long and get up the leaves at South Graham Elementary. This pushes the total value of the contract for Timco Enterprises to $112,900.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. And due to the time sensitivity, we are asking for a vote at the work session. If you have questions or comments, if not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Engel. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Hook.
Thank you.
And at this time, I believe our vice chair has a motion for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I make a motion that we enter into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3 to preserve attorney-client privilege, North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A6, to consider confidential personal information protected under North Carolina General Statute 115C-319 and 115C-321.
Thank you, Mr. Ingles. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you all. Thank you, Ms. Harvey. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously 5-0. At this time, we will move into closed session. We are back in open session. At this time, I invite Ms. Yolanda Anderson, our Chief Human Resources Officer, to the podium for a personnel report.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Fleming. I ask that you approve the personnel report as presented in closed session.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Is there a motion? Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Is there any other business before the board this afternoon? Hearing none?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Ingles. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you all. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you for being with us. Do not forget our public budget meeting is March the 24th at 6 p.m. here in this room, and then our